Hello everybody, this is Todd Frazee and this is the Fusion 360-CAM tutorial for TCOSE-02. For this part, you want to make sure that you've completed the prior assignment, which is the TCOSE-1 part. We aren't going to completely program the TCOSE-2 within this tutorial, but we will be copying toolpath that was established in the TCOSE-1 part. This will save you time and energy. So please make sure, if you haven't finished the TCOSE-1 assignment already, please go back and complete that assignment before proceeding with this part programming. Okay, assuming that we've completed the TCOSE-1 part, we're going to open our TCOSE-2 part. Okay, it should look something like this. Your orientation on the screen might be slightly different, but that doesn't matter. Change that in the machining side of things. Okay, so for this part, we have features on both sides that have to be machined from different angles. There's no way to machine this slot and the countersinks on the opposite side in one operation. We need to plan ahead on how we're going to flip this part and keep it registered. Now, there's a whole bunch of methods to doing this. A traditional machinist might machine soft jaws. I'm going to show you a method I've used a lot. It's tried and true, and for thin parts and low volume, it works very well. We actually are going to machine location pins into the stock, and those location pins will correspond with pin holes that will be drilled into a subplate that's underneath the part. And that'll allow us, no matter what our clamping method is, for us to flip this part around the y-axis and use 1/4 inch dowel pins to locate the part on its second operation. And everything should be registered nice and accurate because it was all cut in the same operation. To do this in Fusion, we have to develop a model for the stock or a sketch for the stock. We're going to create a model, but it involves creating another body. So before we do this, we want to go into the bodies and we want to rename the default name for our model. And I would suggest we call it like the 02 model. And that way, when we need to select on it from this tree, it's discrete. We know that this body is the model or the part. Now, our second body on here is going to be the stock, so we will want to name that stock. To develop the stock, we're going to go to sketch mode. And again, we have to be in design mode to do this. And it really doesn't matter too much what plane you use. It looks like this part was drawn with it extruding down from this plane, so we can just select that same plane as long as we're consistent. So we're going to sketch upon the back of the part and we're going to draw ourselves a rectangle. Alright, make sure it's bigger than the part. The size at this point is a little bit arbitrary. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to draw a line. And we're going to draw a line from the midpoint of the top of our rectangle to the bottom of our rectangle. This is going to bisect it. So at that point, you can exit the line command and highlight your line, right click, and change it into a construction line. Now that we've drawn that line, we want to align this part on the same center line as, or this box we're drawing on the center line of our part. Now I drew mine with the center of the part right on the origin because I started with a circle based on the origin. If you didn't do that, you'll need to pick on one of these features to align it. To do so, we're going to put in a relationship between the line and it's going to be coincident to a center line of the part. So like any of these holes that run on the center line, if you modeled it correctly, should give you alignment of this rectangle so that no matter what size it is, it's centered on our part. This is critical because this is how we're going to establish our origin, and our alignment features need to be on the same axis on the center of our stock, or we won't be flipping our part accurately. Now let's throw some dimensions to give this stock size. So I'm going to go just from the part edges, and we're going to add 1/2 of an inch, so 0.5 IN. Okay, it should be 12.7 in metric. All right, so now we have stock defined with a 1/2 inch margin. Now let's draw our holes that we're going to use for alignment in that stock. So we want them to be for sure constrained to the center line we drew. So how I approach this again is I put the constraints in first. I want these two holes, one to be constrained to the center line, and I want them to be equal in size. Now I want to make the dimension on one of the holes to be 0.25 of an inch, which should be 6.35. Okay, so we have 2/4 inch holes. We've constrained them to the center line of the part, but they're not dimensioned from the edge of the part. So let's dimension from the center line to the edge of our stock, and we're going to use 4 millimeters. We want to leave a lot of clearance here for the cutter that's going to cut around the outside of the part. This gives us enough purchase to have a full radius, full circle, and 1/4 inch pin for registration. Okay, we're going to select Finish Sketch. And now we want to extrude this to be the same size as our part. So we're going to select Extrude. You're going to select inside the rectangle. We're going to select inside the part. And it looks like we're going to have to select inside anything that would be a void. Okay, but we don't want to select inside the 1/4 inch holes, as we do want holes there. So I missed one here. And on our extrusion direction, right now it's going the wrong direction. We are going to select, instead of going an extent, a distance, we're going to go to Object, and we'll select the opposite side of our part, and that'll ensure that it's the same exact thickness. And you'll notice that it defaults to cut. We want to change that back to new body, and it'll create a separate body that's not joined to our model. Looks like I need one more profile selected. Right there. Okay. And we select OK. So now we have this solid with this part in the middle, and we should have another body appear over here on the browser tree. And let's change that to stock, so that we have better chance of visualizing. Right click on the stock, new body in the tree, and allows us to go to Opacity Control, and let's set that at, say, 50%. And then that way we can tell our stock model here from our part model. Okay, so once you're at this stage, you're ready to enter the manufacturing workspace. Make sure you save before you do that. So we're going to go to Workspace, and we're going to go to Manufacture. Now we're going to do something to try to save some time. So we've already programmed the TCOSE-01 part model, and we can leverage some of the toolpath that was used. So we are going to open the TCOSE-01 part, and we need to be in manufacture mode. We want to copy this setup 1, so we're going to right click on it and say copy, and go back to the TCOSE-02 model, highlight setups, right click, and paste. And that should bring in setup 1. You have to open the setups, and then you have to open setup 1. Now, because we copied this from one model to the other, it's got a warning that the toolpath has to be regenerated or generated to be valid in this setup. And that's good. It keeps us from making a mistake. Now, our origin is going to be in a different location, so we have to regenerate all of it because we're going to redo the setup. Okay, so let's do that. We're going to go to Setup, and before we do that, I want to open the model and make sure we can see the two bodies that we have here, the one that defines the stock and the one that defines the model. We're going to right click on the Setup 1, and we're going to go Edit. So we want to define where our origin is. So right now Z is not pointing in a practical direction. Let's go to select Z plane and X axis. So our Z plane is going to be the top of our model part. Okay, so that flipped our Z axis in the correct orientation. And we want our X axis to be the shorter axis if it isn't selected. And we need, it looks like I need to, in this case, deselect the flip axis box. Now we need to tell Fusion what is the model and what is the stock. So we'll start with the model since we're on this page. We select the words nothing, and we're going to select the body of our model. So that tells Fusion that that's the model. And then we go to the stock tab, and we change our stock mode from relative size box to from solid. And then we go over and select our stock model that we made, and that becomes our stock. All right. Now we can go back to setup and set our origin. So our origin is going to be a stock box point, and we're going to select the bottom center, which is, looks like in my case it was already there by default. Perhaps that's a carryover from that's where I selected on the other part. Okay, we're going to go to the Post Process tab, and we're going to call this 0201 Operation 1 with Work Coordinate System Offset 1. And we'll select OK. Alright, this is a good time to save. You've copied stuff from another file, you want to make sure it's in there. Now, some of these operations we're going to use on the part as shown in the current orientation, and some of them need to be used on the second side, like the outside profile. We're still going to approach it for cutting this side first because there's the most amount of features on it. So let's go through what we have here. From our last we had a M3 clearance drilling cycle, and we have basically all M3 clearance holes. Some of them have to be countersunk from the opposite side, and it's most accurate if you do your drilling and countersinking from the same side. So this routine we want to do on the second setup. We're not tapping anything, so we're not tapping anything on this part, so we don't even need the tap drill cycle. So let's go ahead and delete that one. Let's delete the M3 tap, so we're not using it on this. We are going to pocket the slots. We are going to cut the same size bore that we did on the other part, and we are going to cut around the outside. Okay. At this point, I think we want to make our second setup so that we can rearrange the existing toolpath to retain it in the second setup. And for that, we need the second setup created. So let's flip the part. We're going to go Create Setup. We're again going to go to Model Orientation. It's going to be Select Z axis plane and X axis. So we have that selection, pick the top of our stock. We're going to have to flip the X axis. If your X axis, well, we'll select the X axis. We don't need to flip it. And then we're going to go to selecting our model, which is the TCOSE-02 model. That's the body of our part. Now we're going to go to the stock, and we're going to change from relative stock size to from solid. And we're going to select our stock. We're going to go back to the Setup tab, and we're going to select our stock box point for our origin. And we're going to make it on the bottom center again. The advantage of doing this is on the controller itself, provided we always use the bottom of the stock as our registration, it allows us to flip this part without any adjustments on the controller. So we'll select the front center, and it's critical that it's on the same center line as the holes were made on the first operation. Now we can go to post-process, and we're going to call this 02-02, and it's going to be operation 2 with a work coordinate system of 1. I'm going to hit OK. Okay, so now let's move the tool path we want on setup 2. So we know we want our clearance drilling drilled in the second operation. The pockets, we want to keep those on the first operation for the slots. Our counter bore doesn't really matter, but if we're going to do that right before we part the material off, we'll put that on the second operation as well. And we definitely want to contour around the outside on our second operation. So that would complete the part. So these 4 operations we've recycled from our other part. Now let's go back to setup 1, and let's complete our programming. So from this side, really all we're going to do is machine the slots and machine registration holes. Okay, before we reprocess anything, we're going to hide the stock volume. And that will allow us to select on the model. Now we will still have the stock volume rendered by picking on the setup, but the model itself, the body, will be hidden. Okay, otherwise we won't be able to select things that are enveloped by the stock. The stock model served its purpose, and we probably shouldn't have to show it visible again. So let's collapse all this down. And we're done copying, so I'm going to close the data panel. so we have a little more viewing space. Okay, so the first side we're going to basically be cutting these slots, and we're going to drill through to make these registration holes. So let's highlight the slot routine, and we're going to select Edit with the right select. First tab stays the same. Second tab, we're going to pick the top edge of our slots just like we did on the other part. And then we're going to go to the Heights tab, and we leave everything default except for the bottom reference we need to reselect. Our bottom reference is the bottom of one of the two slots since they're the same height. We're going to go to Passes. We're going to leave all that default. We're going to Linking. We're going to leave that all at default. And we're going to hit OK. There we go. So now this has lost its red icon. It's been reprocessed on this model based off this origin. Now let's drill our holes for the registration. Display the stock body for a little bit more, because the stock body is defined where those holes are. We're going to go to the drilling cycle. We're going to select the TCOSE library, and we're going to select tool number 8 for a 1/4 inch drill bit, and then select OK. 4018. Yeah, it looks all reasonable. 40 inches a minute, retract's okay. Geometry. Okay, we're going to select our 2 1/4 inch holes. And we're going to go to heights. Alright, all of this can stay at default except for this last one. The whole bottom, we're going to make some adjustments. So we want it to drill through, but we want it to go quite a bit farther because we want a pin to drop in there. And so I want to go a little bit deeper. 3/8 deep, so it's 0.375. And that'll allow us to have room for a dowel pin to go in our sacrificial plate. And that's what we'll use to register the part when we flip it over. Now we're going to go to cycle, and we're going to go to a deep drilling cycle. And our peck depth, we want to go a little less than that because our material is so thin. We're going to go 0.03 on our peck depth. We also want these precise and straight holes for registration. We'll select OK, and now we've drilled our 2 holes. Setup 1 is completed. We don't need to do any more work on setup 1. Alright, so now let's flip our part and select setup 2, and we do want to make the stock invisible again. Alright, now we're going to go to our M3 clearance holes. Let's right click on that routine and hit Edit, and we'll pick one of the M3 holes, and it should get all of them in order. And it even included these in my case because I made them to the drawing M3. If it skipped those, it's probably because you use the hole clearance guidelines and the holes are slightly bigger, which actually makes more sense. You can choose to manually select those and it'll drill those out. But this makes the part to the drawing. Alright, so if you didn't get these 6 holes in it, you can just go in and individually select them. So the heights, pretty much the heights and all these other tabs, we're going to leave at default. We're going to make them all the same. Select OK. Now we'll go and regenerate the bore. I'm going to right click on that one and hit Edit and select the bore. Make sure the arrow is on the inside, and we can leave everything at default because we copied it on our last routine. And now we're going to move on to the outside parameter. We're going to go right click on it, and we're going to edit it, and everything stays at default here. We go to geometry, we select our new geometry, and then everything on these other fields are the same except for the linking tab. We want to go ahead and select our entry position again as the front left corner. You can select OK. And we've now reprocessed all of the parts of the program that we copied from the TCOSE-01 part. Now we're lacking something. We are lacking the countersinks. Now chamfer, if you do the chamfer before drilling the hole, it actually helps those holes center better for the drilling operation. So I would suggest that we do that routine prior to this drilling operation at the beginning for the clearance holes. So we're going to close this window, highlight setup 2, make sure that's highlighted, and you're going to go to drilling. We're going to select the TCOSE library, and we're going to select tool number 15 for the 1/4 inch 82-degree spot drill, and select OK. Select OK, and it's defaulting to 4,000 RPM, a plunge free to 13. I think it's a little fast, so let's go 10 on that. And it looks like it's doesn't have a default retract feed rate, so we'll just put that in at 40 inches a minute. That's fine. Now we're going to go to geometry. We're going to select the top of the countersink feature. And then we select same diameter, and it should catch all 6 of the countersinks. We go to the next tab on heights. We're going from hole top to hole bottom. That's fine for the countersink. And then we're going to go to cycle. And we're going to change the cycle to a counterbore cycle. This allows us to put a dwell in. So we're going to put in a 1-second dwell, which will allow that cutter to dwell at the bottom and produce a better finish on the countersink. It'll pause 1 second before it retracts back out. So that's OK. And we have our new operation here, but it throws it here at the bottom, and we want it at the very beginning of our program. So simply drag it to the top, and it reorders it in the beginning. So if we are to view what we have, we're going to do the countersinks first, then we come back and make a whole bunch of through holes, and we cut a center bore and cut an outside profile. Alright, so you can visualize this. Let's go ahead and simulate what we've done. Let's start with setup 1. Highlight setup 1, rotate your part to look in the correct orientation for setup 1. Click simulate. We got the stock highlighted. Looks like we got holder hidden. That's fine. We have our 16th end mount. It's going to cut the slots. That's copied over from the TCOSE-01 model. Then our 1/4 inch drill is coming through and drilling 1/4 inch holes. with a pectoral cycle, and we're done. Then we would go to post-process and make our setup sheet now that the part's in the orientation as if the operator's watching. It's a good time to do it. And now let's reorientate our part to show side 2. Select setup 2. Let's simulate that one. Comes through. Those are 6 countersinks. Those are through clearance holes. Cuts the bore. Now it's cutting around the outside perimeter. Not sure why we have a phantom end mill there. I must have some parameter wrong in my settings. It's the amazing segmented end mill. Comes around for the finish pass around the outside. Okay, so we should have through holes everywhere except for the outside perimeter, which has flash. Keep it attached to the material on the outside, and hopefully we can break that material off manually. Okay, so this concludes the TCOSE-02 programming tutorial. To complete your assignment, again, you will have to upload 2 programs and 2 setup sheets for setup 1 and setup 2. All right, and hope everything made sense, and catch you on the next one.